Hello and welcome to Stephen University. That's right, this podcast finally has a name. A genius name, let's be honest. Come up with invented by a friend of mine, Scott, who, shout out Scott.
Scott.
Just I don't know. Well, you can't see this, but I sort of raised my fist in a sort of, yeah, Scott sort of way when I said that. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense.
I just closed my eyes and thought about him for a while.
There you go. I'm sure he'll appreciate that.
It was creepy.
It's a good title because it's sort of because I'm educating you in Steven Universe, so Steven University makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And we said at the end of the last episode that we would have a title this week. So here you go. You got a title.
We say that like they haven't known it all along. Again, we haven't released it from our perspective. We haven't released a single one of these yet. So we're like, yeah, we got a title. You guys, though, just listened to 10 episodes of we don't know what it's called yet, when you guys literally know what it's called. You must feel like time travelers. So with that said, to those of you in the future listening to this, how was Trump's impeachment party? Bold statement? Bold claim?
It is a bold claim, Dan. I'm not saying I don't know.
Do you think the impeachment ceremony will be more or less well attended than his inauguration?
I think Three Doors Down will play again.
I think they will.
Like, they just
anyway,
play other songs.
Let's talk about Steven Universe then, Chris. So this week we watched an episode called what's it called? Arcade Mania. I'm going to be honest. One of my least favorite episodes the show has ever done. And I don't mean that too disparagingly. It's a show I'm very fond of, as we've established. But of all of the episodes, I find this one to be a bit meandering and not really go anywhere. For those who don't remember, I'll very briefly explain. The gems are on a mission right at the start of the episode, and there are some creatures they're fighting. They some of them get away, but Garnet's all badass and like it's fine if they come back. I've got it covered. I'll save the day. So that's all good. Then Steven wants to celebrate the victory with the gems. So he takes them to a local arcade where they Now this is my favorite section of the whole episode, which is where they basically, the gems just don't know how to be human, and they basically really misunderstand the entire arcade. Like, Pearl struggles to understand that she's supposed to crash into things on the car game. Amethyst immediately starts cheating at skee ball. Garnet literally punches a fighting game. It's good fun for a little bit, and then the episode just goes into a very weird territory where Garnet gets sort of caught in like a trance with this sort of rhythm game, and that's when those monsters return, and Steven sort of has to get her back to he has to snap her out of it in order to get her to help them deal with the monster returning, or the monsters returning. So that's the basic principle, as you can imagine. He does, and she does, in terms of waking up and stopping the monsters. But I just think what frustrates me about this episode is there are so many questions. So first of all, they strongly hint this week that the reason Garnet's sort of the leader is because she has some sort of foresight that allows her to sort of guide them to important missions and things, which is actually interesting because she's essentially got a sort of foresight. And later in the episode, Steven removes her glasses, and we reveal she has a third eye. Now, the third eye in human mythology is the sight of, it's future sight. It's the ability to sort of do that. So it all kind of tracks, except for the fact that I don't really, even to this day, 100% understand why she gets into such a weird trance with that game. I just don't understand. It's literally never explained. It's never properly addressed. And that just frustrates the crap out of me, because I think that if your crux of your episode is your hero is entranced, explain where that comes from. So,
well, I sort of viewed that as because it's interesting to just let you go, because like I was a bit kind of like, meh, it's fine, it's an episode of Steven Universe. Like I didn't feel strongly either way. I viewed her trance as, because she was essentially on a mission. That was a mission to her, whether it was the game or not. She operates like that. She operates, I don't want to, almost like a soldier, and that's her mission was to beat that game, so that's what she was doing. And then by Steven destroying the game, that's her being like, wow, you beat it. You destroyed it in a way that it can't be fixed. Now I can go kick some ass over here. My bigger problem was that it wasn't as I don't think it was written as cleverly as previous episodes. So, for example, it's always seemed to me that, like, whilst Garnet may be the more quiet, factual one or whatever, she's, I probably would have pointed to her as the leader, but they work as a team. And from the beginning of this episode, it was like, Garnet's all powerful, and immediately you're like, oh well, in this episode, Garnet's power is going to be somehow taken away, and it was just you could just see what was coming at every turn. And I think the show has been cleverer than that before, and you've not been able to see. And also the villains were quite cool, and visually, the weird big villain at the beginning where she like gemmed its weird monster vagina was weird. I'm sorry, it was weird.
It was a gemmy monster vagina thing. It was a bit weird. It did have a sort of look to it that you would question in a kids show. Yeah.
Very
From a
much
design
so.
perspective, it was odd. The thing is, though, sometimes you don't see the forest for the trees, and I'm not saying the designers intentionally made it look like that. I just think that, with a bit of a bit of foresight, a bit of hindsight. Sorry, even not foresight. Foresight's what Garnet's got. With a bit of hindsight, maybe that's not the best design. It was a bit odd.
No,
so
with the exception of, yeah, that's what I'm saying. The other ones were awesome and interesting and doing unique stuff. And they literally became the background piece. And the episode, instead of dealing with that because visually, all of those things attacking, like when they all started to attack over Pearl and the other one,
Amethyst. Yeah.
I was like, oh shit,
the purple one,
Amethyst. I was like, how are they going to get out of this? That's pretty cool. So they had this really cool thing, and instead it then became Stephen fighting the thing, and they made a bit of a joke of that. Of you always saw this background stuff going on, and even when Garnet got involved, Stephen still had to view it in the background because he was cleaning up the arcade. So they made it work, but just a weird idea when you've got this cool thing. Like you say, I don't know if it was necessarily meandering. I just think weird decisions were made about where the episode went and how it was written.
Yeah, I think so. Well, it's interesting because we haven't talked about this previously on the podcast, but what's funny not funny, what's odd about this show is it's one of the only shows I can think of that isn't written. They don't write a script. They break a story and then they storyboard it instead of having a script. So the whole thing is written visually, if that makes sense, which is why you get some of the great visual gags in this show. My favourite, actually, this week was when there's a bit where Stephen is using his metal detector and he finds something and it's another metal detector. Like, there's just something about that idea that just made me chuckle so much.
I liked... No, you go. Finish that and then I'll say the joke I liked.
No, go on. I want to hear it. That's big.
I liked when he was about to, at the very beginning, when he was about to fall off the cliff, and he was clearly about to fall, and he just made his body rigid and went stealth mode, and then fell. And what I liked about that was for an animation, for a kid's animation, I think this is one of the reasons you like the show, for a kid's animation, it had such a modern humour to it. It had such a New Girl-esque. And New Girl-esque is my... If someone were to say to me, what do you think is the kind of modern humour, I'd be like, New Girl, watch an episode of New Girl. I'd argue they do it too much because those characters talk in a way that no human's being talk. Whereas, like, Friends had... Chandler was quippy and funny. Like in New Girl, every character should be a stand-up, and they're all comedy geniuses. But the way they're talking and the humour being derived from things that aren't necessarily a feedline punchline jokes, but are more sort of quirky, funny things and looks kind of jokes. That humour is the humour that sometimes creeps into Steven Universe. And that's enjoyable when it does, and stealth mode was an example of that. I felt.
I think I totally agree with that, and I think that that's something that sometimes it's a bit jarring when you first see a kids show doing it. That's why I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but my speculation is I think because in the first episode you talked distinctly about how you didn't find it particularly funny, and I think over time you're finding the show funnier and funnier, and I weirdly think that is that barrier going away. You're now expecting humor aimed at you as well as the sort of like slightly more childish jokes, if that makes sense.
Possibly.
So you're more open to to looking for that sort of humor or seeing that sort of humor in it. Whereas I don't think necessarily you were at the very first episode, because I think maybe you were expecting a different approach to the jokes in the show. Because that you're right, it's very modern and it is very adult. It's the sort of stuff that my generation, your generation are finding very funny right now. It's like the sort of stuff we're into, but like you don't really know what kids find funny these days.
But I don't think every joke is that style of humor.
No, that's what's good about it. They do still do both 100%. There's still more generic sort of and general joke. I'd argue that the metal detector joke was a bit more a sort of down the middle joke rather than the stealth.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. But yeah, I think what's interesting though is as well, there's you trace it back to sort of New Girl. I actually trace it back further than that, because I started to see that sort of humor sort of where they're saying things that like. I put it the way I sort of define that kind of humor is when they're observing the situation is humorous, rather than actually making a quip about it. And it's sort of like it's this weird sort of meta level of joke where the characters are a bit more self-aware. And I think it started in Buffy. I think Buffy got there first. I think we didn't really sort of hit with that, and then I think it sort of evolved over the years, and now we get it. Like we have whole sitcoms based around that style of comedy, stuff like New Girl, and as you said, it's sort of slipping into even kids shows now, like we have here in Steven Universe. I think the comedy in this show is really on point though, as a rule. Like I think most episodes there's at least something to laugh at. I think even if the episode's not the best. We're sort of out of the woods now, though, because my two sort of least favourite-y ones from the early period, that we've gotten past both of them now, so...
I mean, it feels like you're veering us to talking about the episode that we're no longer going to talk about, but yes, we've had some dodgy episodes, and now even a Met episode, and this really was that, I didn't react either way, and maybe it's that I'm used to it being a bit weird. I'm used to Stephen being a bit whiny. I'm used to things that if this episode was episode 2, I probably would have ranted about. I'd have been like, it doesn't really have a plot. I'd have, maybe I'm less ranty because the quality, like you say, we're out of the woods, but also maybe because some of those things that would cause me to moan at the beginning, I've just become used to.
Well, I'm looking forward to...
But I would use the phrase "used to," not "won over by." Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like we're about to sort of now, like, we're in a relatively okay run of episodes at the moment, but there are some turning points coming up now where the show really starts to veer into what it becomes. So I'm not going to say too much, but we are now sort of in the transition that the show makes into being something not so drastically different that you wouldn't recognize it, but something a little bit more valuable, something with a little bit more substance. I don't want to disparage the early episodes of the show, but I feel like the show has really found. I tell you what it is. It's not so much about having more substance. It's about them figuring out what does and doesn't work about this show and slowly weeding out the stuff that works less. And I think that they're really experimenting in these first sort of 10 to 20 episodes. And there's mixed results in that period, and then the show just finds a really incredible stride, in my opinion. What did you think to the reveal with Garnet then, the third eye, and the notion that she has a certain amount of sort of future sight?
I don't, because I'm at a point where I don't know much about any of them. Like she could have 20 eyes, and I'd be like, okay, she's got 20 eyes. Like that didn't mean too much to me, if I'm honest.
Oh, that's interesting, because when I first saw this episode, I sort of, even though I couldn't extrapolate any actual like info out of it because they've not explained why as such, there was an element. I remember I watched this one with my girlfriend. We both sort of looked at each other like, ooh, 3 eyes, that could mean something. They've not shown us that for no reason. And I guess actually this might come back to that thing we were talking about where when I watched this show, I'd already sat through Adventure Time and I'd learned that details mean stuff. It's not arbitrary. It's all it's thought out. So like once Adventure Time sort of taught me to think that way, little things like that in this show, I was like, that's a hint. That's going somewhere. That third eye is not complete sort of complete sort of thing where it's just like it'll show up this episode and you'll never, you know what I mean? Like we were starting to get a sense of they're teaching us slowly little things about these people that we should be able to put together and start to work out. So it's worth keeping your eye out for stuff like that. Hey, eye out. See what I did there? See what I did there?
I think for some nice. I think for some reason though, and it's weird because it's not the way I watch, say, Lost or Fringe. For some reason though, I mean, because I got that. I just for some reason I care more about the answer than the hints. Do you know what I mean? I don't know why that is. I couldn't tell you. Maybe it's because it's kind of wrapped up in this sort of silly kids animation. But yeah, I'm just like, okay, well, when they tell me what that means, I'll judge whether that's cool.
Interesting.
If that's bad. Yeah.
Interesting.
And that may sound like me trying to make up an excuse and be like, oh yeah, no, I did know it was something, I just didn't care. But that's true. I don't know.
Yeah. No. Interesting. Cool. Have we talked about the theme yet, Chris, on this podcast? I've wanted your opinion on the theme song.
I like the theme tune. I'm getting to a point where I don't sing it like, you know, I'm not walking down the street singing it, but when it comes on, I'm a bit like, Paul and Stephen. Yeah, I sort of.
It is obscenely catchy, and that never stops. Once we get to a certain point in the series as well, I can show you the extended 3-minute version of the song. I can't show it you now because it has some spoilers in the video, but there's a sort of 3 or 4 minute version of the song which is both really sweet, really kind of like hinty about where the show's going, and like there's lots of cool stuff in it. That they released that sometime, I want to say last year, about a year and a half ago. So there's a certain episode we can get up to, and I'll say we can watch it now. Maybe we'll sort of talk about that briefly at the end of one of the other episodes.
Yeah, sounds good.
Anyway, so I think are we saying that's everything for this week, Chris?
Yeah, I think it's been a bit longer. You've had some bonus SU chat. Sorry, SU is just what we call. Well, Stephen University, we can still call it SU. That's cool.
Stephen University. Yeah, there you go. So that is everything for this week. We'll be back next week with not Arcade Mania. No, that's the one we just watched, with an episode titled Giant Woman. So now go away.
Nice.
Am I allowed to tell the audience to go away, Chris?
Yeah, don't do that. That's not the good bonus content we want.
Stick around.
Well, just don't stick around for this episode. It's over. But play the next one.
There you go. What he said.
Yeah. We've got a title, but we're still going to meander and talk bollocks at the beginning and the end.
Can't be helped.